Welcome back to Threaded Realms. Today, I'll be continuing our series on epic 80s fantasy movies. I'll be covering in the second episode the 1985 cult classic Legend, starring Tim Curry and Tom Cruise. This movie brought epic dark fantasy for adults to film. I really loved Legend growing up, and so in order to prepare for this movie, I decided that I would rewatch the movie. And I've watched it many, many times over the years. Oftentimes while I'm sewing or doing things in the background, but I decided in preparation of this to just sit down and watch the movie from beginning to end. And I ended up incredibly confused. I didn't understand why scenes were there that I had never seen before, and then scenes that I clearly remember were not there. And so, after being confused and slightly annoyed, I decided to take some time and hit the Google machine. Well, it turns out there's actually three versions of Legend. There is the European release, there is the US release, and then there is the director's cut. I learned that I had been growing up watching the director's cut. So there is an extended scene with Meg Mucklebones where Jack is using the shield to charm her and she's looking at herself in it, and then she pulls the shield away and looks at herself in it and hangs it up on a tree behind her. And then Jack drops the sword in the water, which is evidence to him not being a warrior, something that we are tuned into later in his fight against the darkness. He reaches into the water and pulls it out, and right as she turns around and says, "Give me a kiss before I eat you," he kills her. In the US version, she's looking at the shield, she turns around, he pulls the sword out and kills her, and then somehow the shield's behind her. So when I was watching it, I was so confused, but that's one of many things. I would definitely say that if you've only watched the US version, you should watch the director's cut. Unfortunately, that comes with the caveat that you're going to have to go on Amazon and buy the DVD because I couldn't find the director's cut streaming anywhere. While Legend is an amazing movie, it's a cult classic because when it first came out in theaters, it was actually a flop. It only made $23.5 million globally compared to its $25 million budget. Over time, obviously, has gained this cult classic and people love it, but it definitely was not seen for its value when it first came out. Something has got to be said about the VFX work that was done in order to make these over the top creatures. Tim Curry had to have a harness and sit in the chair for 5 hours of makeup to be made into the darkness. He even had to have a neck brace put in for the 4-foot horns that were on his head, which were eventually made hollow to try to reduce the strain. He had to sit in a bath for 5 hours to loosen up the spirit gum that was used to put it on to his body. One time he tried pulling it off too fast and actually damaged his skin. Something interesting I discovered while doing my research was that Ridley Scott really did not have a lot of faith in his US audience. So they added a scene at the beginning of the movie to imply that Lily and Jack had relations, and he cut out other scenes and made it more action-packed. And I actually feel like that causes problems overall. As I said, some of the cuts are a little bit clunky, things don't make sense. In order to add the kissing scene at the beginning of the movie, they actually had to reverse the kissing scene from the end of the movie. And while you may not realize that's what's happening in the moment when you're watching it, you definitely realize that something is wrong, something feels not quite right. The costuming in this movie is actually really on point because all of the characters are costumed in a way that kind of tell who they are. So Jack is in something that looks very Peter Pan-esque with like almost leaves on it and green, and it's short, nothing like a man in a skirt. Meanwhile, Lily is in pure white, in everything you think of when you think of a medieval princess fairy tale. And throughout the story, you see the change. You see her change from this beautiful pure white dress to it becoming tattered and torn, and then she's into the black dress. But at the end, she's again in her pure white dress, and she is how she was at the beginning. Her makeup was really interesting because at the start, it's just very light, very glittery, pure, not a lot to it. But when she's transformed into the darkness, her makeup also follows that transition. It's heavier. She's wearing a dark black lip. She has heavy eyeliner that streaks down. They even gave her a unibrow, which was an interesting choice. I would love to know what the thought process was behind that. And of course, the Lord of Darkness is meant to be the temptation that he is. He is shirtless, he is cloven hooves, he has these giant horns, and to be honest, I really wonder how many of our book talk girlies were inspired by watching this when they were young, because I think I've seen and read a couple books that were heavily inspired by this. Judge me for my reading if you want. I don't care. Overall, Legend is an epic fantasy. It is dark, it is brooding, it is light, it is wonderful. And I can say that my love of unicorns from a child to now was definitely brought in from Legend. I love that rather than trying to take an existing fairy tale and cram it into the medium of movie, Ridley Scott chose to have a fairy tale created just for this movie. And it has a lot of the elements that you see in the Brothers Grimm stories, which is what actually inspired all of this. Every fairy tale has a moral to it, so a lesson that's learned at the end of it, and Legend is no different. They tell you at the very beginning that there must be balance in the universe. There must be lightness and darkness. In order to have darkness, you must have light. In order to have light, you must have darkness. And there must always be balance, and that's how legends are made. But I also feel it tells another story. It tells the story of mistakes made and amendments. Lily makes a serious, grave mistake. She ignores what she was told, and it causes devastation. But she's willing to sacrifice herself in order to fix it. And I think that's a really interesting idea to tell people, is that even if you make a mistake, if you try hard, you can fix it. Legend is a comfort movie from my childhood, and I will always love it. I am a little bit drawn back by the fact that I cannot just easily watch the director's cut that I grew up with, but I will still enjoy the US cut. If you've watched Legend before, tell me in the comments the favorite elements of Legend. Is there anything that you loved? Was there something that damaged you as a child? Because Meg Mucklebone will forever be a character in my nightmares. Legend is definitely an epic fantasy. If you've not watched Legend, I really hope that this video has inspired you to watch it and see the things that I didn't tell you about. If you have watched it, tell me your favorite things, and also tell me which version you grew up with. I'm wondering how many of us live in a world where we can't watch the director's cut that we know and love. There is something that is beautiful about being an adult and being able to delve into the fantasy world. And I feel like this movie has inspired many people to pursue their dreams in writing and art. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so that you never miss a moment of Threaded Realms.